Good morning and welcome. Today, use this video to get through what you need to for today, and that is basically a warm-up. A couple of the examples in your notes, and then working on some practice on your own for the rest of today. So let's go through, check out the warm-up. Again, typically, same things, appropriate mask wearing, cell phones. Again, make sure you are listening to the video. Not just watching is most useful, and then make sure you're on task. Okay, so warm up, and then again a few notes, and then working on some practice. So just a quick reminder of what we did yesterday. We worked on solving using the zero product property. So zero product property allows us to solve a quadratic equation. So here are our steps. Set each equation equal to zero. Set the equation equal to zero. Factor. Set each factor equal to zero, and then solve both equations are the typical steps that we need to take. So in the warm-up, pause the video and try these out. See if you remember anything about these, and then unpause and go from there. Okay, so we have our list of steps. First thing, set each equation, or set the whole equation equal to zero. Number one, that is already done. It's already set equal to zero. Number two, factor. It is already factored. Right? We have our two parentheses already broken down for us. So step two is done. Step three, set each factor equal to zero. And then step four is solve. All right, so for this first one, we just get p equals 1. For the second one, I subtract 5 on both sides, right? And then divide by 8, and I get p equals -5/8. And that's it. That's done. Okay. Number two, let's go back to the beginning. Set the equation equal to 0. Done. That's step one. Step two, factor. Okay, this time we have to factor. First thing when we factor, we look for a GCF, right? So right away I know I can at least divide by 3 and a v. So my GCF is 3v. That leaves me with a v plus 3. So factoring is done. Set each factor equal to 0. So this time we have two factors still, right? So 3v equals 0, and v plus 3 equals 0. And then solve. For this first one, I'm dividing by 3. There is still a variable there, so I can still solve, and I just get a solution of 0. My second answer, -3. Subtract 3, I get -3. All right, let's take a look at the next two. For number 3, again, let's go back to the beginning. Set the equation equal to 0. This is what we're looking for, equals 0, already done. Factor. All right, here's what I'm looking for, GCF. If I look between 4 and 9, there is nothing. So next thing I notice, it's two terms. It's a binomial. It's a difference. And these are both perfect squares, right? So my perfect of squares would be difference of squares would be 2n plus 3, 2n minus 3. And then I'm ready to set each of those factors equal to 0. And solve. So I'm subtracting 3 in this first equation to get 2n equals -3. Divide by 2, n equals -3/2. A little bit of the opposite in the other one. So add 3 to both sides. I get 2n equals +3. Divide by 2, I get n equals +3/2. Done. Last one here, number 4. Let's go back to our steps. Set the equation equal to 0. Not done. So I need to subtract 6 on both sides to get that set equal to 0. So the only thing I do is bring everything else down, and notice how I'm putting it in order. Right? So I'm putting it in order of the squared term, and then the regular p term, and then the constant, the regular number. And now I need to factor. And this time, again, there's no GCF. There's 3 terms. This is going to be my guessing and checking. Okay? So that first term, there's only one way to get 7p, and that's if you have 7p times a p. There are a couple different ways we could get that 6, 1 and 6, 2 and 3. So I'm going to have to do a little guessing and checking here. So just thinking through, I know it has to be negative, right? So one of them has to be negative and positive. The sign does matter. Remember, the sign does matter because of this 7. That will affect the different combinations. So the sign position and the sign itself, one positive, one negative. So I don't want to get too large of numbers. So if I started with 1 and 6, I think I might be getting larger numbers than I need. So I'm just going to start with 2 and 3. And let me just put down 2 and 3. And let's see if I just guessed correctly. So the middle term, right? Remember, we need to get negative 11p when I combine those. So in this case, I end up with 21p minus 2p is 19p. That doesn't work. So if I flip the signs, that doesn't change. That's just going to change the sign of that outcome. So I'm going to switch these numbers and see if that works. I'm going to keep the signs the same. So checking that middle term, 7p times 2 is 14p. Negative 3 times p is negative 3p. 14 minus 3 is 11, positive. So now I know that I need to switch the sign. Okay, so now I get a positive 3p and a negative 14p. That does combine to negative 11p. Okay, again, getting good at factoring trinomials is going to be very useful in this little unit. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and focus back on my current objective, and that is to finish solving. So again, take each factor, set them equal to 0, and solve. Right, so subtract 3 and divide by 7. I get negative 3 over 7, and the second answer is positive 2. Okay, so I want to do a few more like number 4. So in your note packet, you need your notes out from the last class period. We skipped over most of that first page, so we're jumping back to wherever we left off there. We're starting at number 9. So we're going to take a look at number 9 and 10, then have you try 2 more, and then get to some practice. So again, just kind of talking through the steps, right? So pause the video, find this note packet, or get one, and then pick up from here. So again, just thinking about our factoring steps here. Set the equation equal to 0, right? So this is not equal to 0. So in this case, I'm going to add 3y squared to the other side. And when I rearrange that, I'm going to put that 3y squared first. Typically, that's the order we look for, so that's helpful to do that right away. So 3y squared plus 23y plus 14. And once again, we're back to factoring. So we need to factor GCF. 3 does not go into 23 or 14, so there's no GCF, so time to do a little guessing and checking. And let's talk through again, just remember, you could use the area model. We know that's 3y squared, this is 14. These two spaces have to combine to 23. Everything's positive, so that makes it a little bit nicer. And then I also know the only way to get 3y squared is to have 3y times y. So really now I need to figure out, okay, so things that multiply to 14. 1 and 14, 2 and 7. Again, when you're using larger numbers, that potentially leaves you with some larger combinations here. So if you try 1 and 14, again, everything's positive. So you don't have to worry about signs, but when I use 1 and 14 in those spots, I end up with 3y and 14y. That gets me 17y. And if I switch those, right, so if I make the 14 up here, think about when I multiply 3y times 14, I'm going to get, what is that, 42y and a 1y, and that doesn't give me 23 either. So it's not 1 and 14, so it's got to be 2 and 7. Again, the position does matter. So try something, and if it doesn't work, switch them around and try it again. So I just put the 7 up there, the 2 down here. I get 21y and 2y. And that combines to 23y. Perfect. So my two factors to continue. 3y plus 2 and y plus 7. keep bringing down the equal 0 because that will help you remember that you still need to do the next steps. So set each factor equal to 0. So 3y plus 2 equals 0. Y plus 7 equals 0. And then solve. The first one, you have 2 steps, subtract 2, and then divide by 3. So I end up with y equals negative 2/3. Get a little cramped for space here. And then subtract 7, I get y equals negative 7. All right, number 10. Again, start at the beginning, set the equation equal to 0. It is not equal to 0, so I need to subtract 49. Subtract 49 on both sides. I get 0. Bring down everything in the minus 49. And again, talking about factoring, there's no GCF. This is a difference of squares, though. So 3n plus 7, 3n minus 7. Once we factor, set each factor equal to 0 and solve. And again, similar steps, just some opposite signs here. So subtract 7, and then I divide by 3, I get n equals negative 7/3. And the other one, you're going to notice we get kind of opposite signs. So n equals positive 7/3. Okay, before you move on here to the next individual practice, try the 11 and 12. Pause the video, try those out, and see how you're doing so far. And then you can get or continue working on the individual practice that you picked up. Okay, so check it out. You can check your answers here. Again, this first one, add 40, right? So adding 40 to both sides. Notice there is a GCF. So take that 2 out, right? So we took the 2 out of the GCF as a GCF, and then you can factor the remaining trinomial. That one might have been a little tricky because there was multiple steps to factor. But once you have your 2 factors, you don't really have to pay attention to this 2 anymore because there's no variable with it. So your 2 factors, set them equal to 0, and then solve. So you get c equals positive 5 and c equals positive 4. For number 12, subtract 64. It's a difference of squares. There's your difference of squares pattern. Set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So positive 8 and negative 8. All right, so quick summary. There's a spot for you to put these on your notes. Quick summary of steps. If you haven't written them down yet, write them down now. Set the equation equal to 0, right? So we want the equation to the whole equation right off the bat to be equal to 0. And then factor, whatever that means. That means look for GCF and then look for any of the other types of factoring from there. And then we take each factor, set them equal to 0. Sometimes there are 3 factors, so set them all equal to 0 if they have a variable with them. And then solve those equations, and those are your solutions. So these are the 2 individual practice that you can work on. On this side, the one that says, what is the title of this picture? Notice all of those are set equal to 0. Right, so you don't have to worry too much about that first step, but when you get to the next one, so if you work through today and get done with this one, you should be feeling pretty good. The next step would be working on the next one where you do have to get them set equal to 0. Okay, so notice all of those, or none of those, are set equal to 0. Okay, so again, here's where we're at. You're practicing today for the rest of today. Get as far as you can. We'll continue working on some practice tomorrow, but you do have a lesson quiz tomorrow, and we'll take care of that. And then just remember, final exam review and final exam itself is coming up the next 2 weeks. All right. Weekly reviews right now. If you are looking and thinking, how can I prepare for our final exam? Weekly reviews are going to be your number one source of review, or best opportunity to review with things you already have. Okay, we will do review in class, but weekly reviews themselves will put you in a good spot to do well. Okay, I hope you have a good day. If you haven't done the 8.1 Intro to Quadratics notes yet, you should do those as soon as possible. Go through them, right? Make sure you get those submitted. Those are the last video notes. Weekly review number 13 is the last weekly review as well. Okay. Have a good day.